So let's talk about processes. Uh, let's talk about basic things like the difference between a process and a procedure. Oftentimes in service-related businesses, those terms are kind of thrown around as being the same thing. A process is a procedure, and a procedure is a process. That's not accurate. A process is any action we take. Riding a bicycle is a process. Falling down a set of stairs is a process. Cooking lasagna, for example, though, is a procedure. You're following specified scripted rules. A procedure generally covers six things: who, what, when, where, why, and how. Those are very explicit things that are stated. This person is going to do this specific action to get this result at this time, and here's how they're going to go about it, among other things. So a process could be, we could have a sales process, but you might have a call taking procedure which specifies exact actions and covers who, what, when, where, why, and how. The problem with confusing those two things and talking about procedures and processes as the same thing is it gets confusing for people because they begin to think that it's no big deal to not follow procedures because they're just a process. In my world, though, and my thought is, I want them to know procedures are to be followed precisely. Processes are things we do. Again, driving a vehicle is a process. Are we going to have a procedure for driving a vehicle? No, probably not. That's probably unnecessary. Are we going to have a procedure, though, for safely parking a vehicle in front of a customer's property? Where we put out a safety cone, for example, or chalk the wheels, or whatever would be applicable in your world? Yeah, that might be very applicable and appropriate. So it's important to start speaking in language where we differentiate between a procedure and a process. Another thing to consider is sometimes people think checklists are procedures, and checklists are just a list of things not to forget. They're not a procedure. It's just as we do this task, whether it's a procedure or process, here's 7 things we got to make sure we do, and we check those things off, and it's just a checklist. A checklist, though, is not a procedure. A procedure explains who, what, when, where, why, and how. That is in generally speaking, how I would define a procedure. Again, falling down a set of stairs is a process. Stubbing your toe is a process. So my point with that is, not all things that are processes are things that have positive outcomes. You could have a sales process that's not working. You could have a service process that is giving you outcomes you don't want. It doesn't mean it's a procedure. And so one way to look at this is all procedures are processes, but not all processes are procedures. So hopefully that clarifies that a little bit and will help people start speaking in language so that their employees understand when there's a procedure. We have this thing in our procedure book. This is to be followed precisely. Processes are a little more loosey-goosey or a little more, you just naturally know how to do things. Again, you naturally know how to drive a vehicle. You wouldn't probably write a procedure on how to drive a vehicle, for example.